Title: The Man Behind the Wall. It was 2:47 a.m. when I heard someone whisper my name from inside my bedroom wall. Not outside, not through a window, inside the wall. I froze instantly. The voice sounded weak, raspy, almost like someone hadn't spoken in years. Daniel. For several seconds I couldn't breathe. My bedroom was completely dark except for the faint blue glow of my alarm clock. 2:47 a.m. Again. Daniel. This time it came from directly behind my bed. I jumped up so fast that I nearly fell onto the floor. Every light in the room came on at once. My hands were shaking. I stood there staring at the wall behind my bed. Nothing. Silence. Just an ordinary wall. At least that's what I wanted to believe. I lived alone in northern Michigan in a small 2-story house I had inherited from my grandfather. The house was old, very old, built sometime in the 1940s. It creaked constantly. The pipes rattled. The floors groaned. Every strange sound could usually be explained away. But not this. Walls don't whisper people's names. At least they shouldn't. I spent the rest of the night sitting on my couch holding a baseball bat. When daylight finally arrived, I convinced myself I had imagined everything. Lack of sleep, stress, maybe a dream. That explanation lasted exactly 4 hours. At 11:15 a.m., I was working from home when I heard a loud thump upstairs. It sounded like a heavy object hitting the floor. I immediately ran up the stairs. Nothing was out of place. No broken furniture. No fallen boxes. Nothing. As I turned to leave the room, I noticed something strange. A trail of dust. Tiny footprints. Not shoe prints. Bare feet. The footprints emerged from the corner of the room and disappeared directly into the wall. I stared at them for several seconds. The wall was solid. There was nowhere to go. Yet the footprints ended there. My stomach dropped. I took photos with my phone. Then I vacuumed the dust away. I didn't want to think about it. I certainly didn't want to look at it all day. That night I called my friend Kyle. Kyle was the kind of person who never believed anything supernatural. If a ghost floated across his living room, he'd probably accuse it of trespassing and ask for identification. After hearing my story, he laughed. "Dude, you live in an 80-year-old house. What about the footprints? Probably mice. Mice with human feet." He laughed harder. I didn't. Before hanging up, he suggested installing cameras. I ordered 3 security cameras that same evening. The cameras arrived 2 days later. One faced the front door. One faced the hallway upstairs. One pointed directly at my bedroom. I felt ridiculous setting them up. At the same time I felt safer. The first 2 nights nothing happened. No strange sounds. No whispers. No footprints. I actually started feeling embarrassed. Maybe Kyle was right. Maybe I was just paranoid. Then Friday night arrived. Around midnight I was watching television when my phone vibrated. Motion detected. Bedroom camera. My heart skipped. I opened the app. The camera showed my bedroom. At first everything looked normal. Then I saw it. A shadow. Standing beside my bed. A human-shaped silhouette. Completely motionless. I zoomed in. The image became blurry. The figure looked unnaturally tall. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. My pulse exploded. I grabbed the baseball bat and ran upstairs. The bedroom was empty. The camera still showed motion alerts. Yet nobody was there. I checked under the bed, closets, bathroom, nothing. Then I noticed something else. The bedroom door was closed. I always left it open. Always. A cold sensation moved through my chest. I didn't sleep that night. The following morning I reviewed the footage. What I saw made my blood run cold. At 12:07 a.m. the bedroom door slowly opened. Nobody entered. Nobody exited. Then the shadow appeared. Not walking, not entering, appearing. One frame empty, next frame occupied. The figure remained beside my bed for nearly 3 minutes. Then it vanished, just disappeared. I nearly threw my phone. For the first time I considered selling the house. I didn't care how irrational that sounded. Something was wrong, very wrong. The next week became a nightmare. Every night brought new disturbances. Footsteps above my ceiling, whispering behind walls, doors opening, objects moving. One morning I found every kitchen cabinet standing open. Another morning all the lights were on. Then came the scratching. Late Tuesday night, 3:11 a.m. A scratching noise woke me. Slow, deliberate. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It sounded like fingernails dragging across wood. The sound came from inside the wall beside my bed. I turned on the lamp. The scratching stopped instantly. Then I heard breathing, heavy breathing, coming from inside the wall. I bolted from the room. The next day I hired a contractor. I didn't tell him everything. I simply explained that I heard noises inside the walls. He spent hours inspecting the house. Finally he found something strange. A hollow section behind my bedroom. According to the blueprints there shouldn't have been empty space there. Yet there was. The contractor looked confused. Looks like somebody modified the structure years ago. What does that mean? He shrugged. There's a hidden cavity back here. I felt sick. A hidden cavity. Inside the wall. Exactly where the whispers originated. The contractor suggested opening it. I agreed immediately. The following morning he arrived with tools. Together we stood in my bedroom. He cut into the drywall. Dust filled the air. Several minutes later a large section of wall fell away. Behind it was darkness. A narrow hidden room. Neither of us spoke. The contractor shined his flashlight inside. The beam illuminated old blankets, water bottles, food wrappers. My heart stopped. Someone had been living there. Recently. Very recently. Then the flashlight landed on something else. Photographs. Dozens of photographs. All of me. Sleeping. Watching television. Working. Cooking. Photos taken from inside the hidden room. I nearly vomited. The contractor immediately called police. Officers arrived within 20 minutes. They searched the hidden room thoroughly. The space stretched through multiple sections of the house. It connected to walls, closets, even parts of the attic. Someone could move throughout the entire home without being seen. The officers found more disturbing evidence. Food, fresh footprints, a flashlight, blankets, and a notebook. Inside the notebook were pages filled with writing. Every page mentioned me, descriptions of what I wore, what I ate, what time I went to bed, everything. One entry simply read, "Daniel looked scared tonight." Another, "He heard me breathing. I couldn't stop shaking." The police believed somebody had secretly lived inside the house for months, maybe longer. The hidden passages likely existed for decades. My grandfather probably never knew, or maybe he did. That possibility terrified me even more. An officer asked if there was anywhere the intruder could have escaped. The contractor pointed toward the attic. A search team investigated immediately. That's when they found the tunnel. A narrow wooden passage leading from the hidden room into the attic and eventually outside through a concealed opening behind the chimney. Whoever lived there had an escape route, and they had used it. The intruder was gone. For 3 days police searched the surrounding area. Nothing. No suspects. No arrests. No answers. I moved into a hotel. There was no chance I was staying in that house. Not after what they found. On the 4th day something happened. At 1:18 a.m. my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Silence. Then breathing. Heavy breathing. The same breathing I heard from inside the wall. I hung up instantly. Seconds later a text arrived. One sentence. "I missed the house." I nearly dropped my phone. Police traced the number. Burner phone. Unregistered. Dead end. I thought things couldn't get worse. I was wrong. The next evening officers reviewed additional evidence from the hidden room. One detective called me. His voice sounded uneasy. "Daniel, we found something else." "What?" "There are older notebooks." "Okay, they belong to different years." I felt my stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" "There are notebooks dating back almost 20 years. The detective paused. "It appears several homeowners were being watched." I couldn't speak. Several homeowners. That meant this wasn't random. The person had been doing this for years, maybe decades, watching families, living inside walls, learning routines, remaining hidden. The detective believed the intruder knew every corner of the house, every escape route, every blind spot, which explained why nobody ever caught him. A week later I returned to the house one final time. Police had cleared it. The hidden spaces were destroyed. Everything was supposedly safe. I only came back to collect remaining belongings. I was determined never to sleep there again. As I packed boxes upstairs, I noticed something on the bedroom floor. A folded piece of paper. My blood froze. I was certain it wasn't there before. Hands trembling, I opened it. Inside were 5 words. "I still know where you live." No signature. No fingerprints. Nothing. Just those words. Police never identified who left the note. They never identified the person living in the walls. The investigation eventually went cold. I sold the house 6 months later, at a massive loss. I didn't care. Money meant nothing compared to peace of mind. Today I live with a roommate. People always ask why. I usually make up excuses. Lower expenses, good company, whatever sounds normal. The truth is much simpler. After hearing my name whispered from inside a wall, after discovering photographs of myself taken while I slept, after learning someone had secretly lived inside my house, I never wanted to be alone again. Sometimes late at night, when everything is quiet, I still wake up suddenly. I still listen carefully, waiting, terrified I'll hear breathing behind the walls, and every now and then. The woman in the security footage. The police told me there was nobody in my house. The problem was, I was watching a woman walk through my hallway while they were saying it. The officer stood beside me in my living room. My front door was locked. Every window was locked. The house had already been searched twice. Yet on the security monitor mounted above my desk, a pale woman wearing a long white nightgown slowly walked across the upstairs hallway. The officer saw it too. Neither of us said a word. The footage froze. Then the woman vanished. That was the moment I realized something was inside my house. And it wasn't the first time. In 2024, I bought a house outside a small town in Pennsylvania. It sat alone near a forest. The nearest neighbor was almost half a mile away. The house itself wasn't huge. 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, large basement, nothing special. The previous owner had died 6 months earlier. According to the realtor, he was an elderly man named Walter. He passed away from natural causes. The family wanted to sell the property quickly. Because of that, I got an unbelievable deal. At the time, I felt lucky. Now I know better. The first month was perfect, quiet, peaceful, exactly what I wanted. I worked remotely as a graphic designer. Most of my days were spent sitting in my office creating advertisements and logos. The isolation helped me focus. There were no noisy neighbors, no traffic, no distractions, just silence. Then strange things started happening. Small things at first, things easy to ignore. I would leave a kitchen cabinet open. Hours later it would be closed. I'd leave lights on. Later they'd be off. At first I blamed myself. I figured I was distracted. Work stress. Nothing unusual. Then one morning I found muddy footprints in my laundry room. The prints looked fresh. They led from the basement stairs, and disappeared halfway across the floor. There was no trail leading back. No explanation. Nothing. I cleaned them up and moved on. But deep down, something felt wrong. A week later I was eating dinner while watching television. Suddenly I heard a loud bang upstairs. It sounded like someone dropped a heavy object. I muted the TV. Silence. The sound didn't repeat. I grabbed a flashlight and checked every room. Nothing. Everything looked normal. As I walked past the guest bedroom, I noticed something strange. The closet door was open. I always kept it shut. Always. A cold feeling crawled up my spine. I stared inside. Empty. At least it appeared empty. I shut the door and left. That night I barely slept. The following morning I decided to install security cameras. Not because I believed somebody was inside. I just wanted peace of mind. 3 cameras. 1 downstairs. 1 covering the hallway upstairs. 1 facing the basement stairs. Simple. Nothing fancy. The cameras worked perfectly. For 4 days. Then I got my first alert. Motion detected. 2:13 a.m. Upstairs hallway camera. I immediately opened the app. The footage loaded. Nothing. Just an empty hallway. I replayed the clip. Still nothing. Then I slowed it down. My blood turned to ice. For less than 1 second, a woman appeared at the end of the hallway, standing completely still, pale face, dark eyes, long white nightgown. The next frame showed nothing. She was gone. I watched the footage 20 times. The figure was absolutely there. Yet she only appeared for a single frame. Like a glitch. I convinced myself it had to be a camera error. It had to be. There was no other explanation. The alerts continued. Every night. Always between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m. Each clip showed the same woman. Sometimes at the end of the hallway. Sometimes standing near the basement door. Sometimes directly in front of the camera. Always for 1 frame. Then gone. I stopped sleeping. Stopped eating normally. Stopped thinking clearly. The footage consumed me. I became obsessed. One evening I reviewed every recording side by side. That's when I noticed something horrifying. The woman was getting closer. Every new clip showed her a little nearer to the camera, a few feet at a time, like she was approaching slowly, deliberately, watching, waiting. I finally called my friend Jason. Jason worked as an electrician. More importantly, he wasn't afraid of anything. At least that's what he claimed. I showed him the footage. His smile disappeared immediately. That's creepy. You think it's fake? No. Then what is it? He didn't answer. Instead he offered to spend the night. I agreed. Having somebody else there felt comforting. For the first time in weeks, I felt less alone. That feeling didn't last long. At 2:41 a.m., we were sitting in the living room watching movies when we heard footsteps upstairs. Heavy footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Both of us froze. The footsteps continued. One step, another, another. Walking across the hallway, Jason stood up immediately. So somebody's up there. We grabbed flashlights, and slowly climbed the stairs. The footsteps stopped. The hallway was empty. Every room was empty. No signs of forced entry. No open windows. Nothing. As we turned to leave, Jason suddenly grabbed my arm. Don't move. What? He pointed toward the hallway camera. The tiny red light indicating motion recording was active. Something had triggered it, yet nobody was there. We immediately reviewed the footage. The camera showed us entering the hallway. Behind us stood the woman, watching, only visible for one frame. Jason turned white. Neither of us slept after that. The next morning he left. Before leaving he said something that still bothers me. I don't think somebody is breaking in. What do you mean? I think something else is happening. That was the first time anyone else had validated my fear. And honestly, I wish he hadn't. 3 nights later things escalated. At exactly 3:03 a.m., every smoke detector in the house activated simultaneously. The alarm was deafening. I jumped out of bed, heart racing. I searched every room. No smoke, no fire, nothing. Then I heard another sound. A woman laughing. Soft, distant, coming from downstairs. I froze. The laugh lasted only a few seconds. Then silence. Complete silence. I ran outside and called the police. 2 officers arrived quickly. They searched the entire property. House, basement, garage, everything. Nothing. No signs of anyone being there. The officers were polite but skeptical, until we checked the cameras. The footage showed something impossible. At 3:03 a.m., seconds before the alarms activated, the woman appeared in every camera simultaneously. Upstairs hallway, basement stairs, living room. At the exact same moment, standing still, watching. One officer stared at the footage, then looked at me, then looked away. Neither officer had an explanation. After they left, I sat awake until sunrise. That's when I noticed something outside. A figure standing near the tree line, watching the house. A woman, long white dress, motionless. I grabbed binoculars. The figure was gone, just gone. The forest stood empty, but I knew what I saw. The next few days became unbearable. Objects moved constantly. Doors opened. Lights flickered. The cameras captured dozens of sightings. Always the same woman. Always closer. Always watching. Then came the worst night. The night that changed everything. I woke suddenly at 2:57 a.m. My bedroom door was open. I always slept with it shut. Every hair on my body stood up. The hallway beyond was dark, silent. Then I heard breathing. Not outside. Not in another room. Inside my bedroom. I slowly sat up. The breathing continued. Deep, slow, steady. Someone was in the room. I reached for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it across the room. The beam landed on a woman standing beside my closet. Pale skin, dark eyes, white nightgown, exactly like the footage. For several seconds neither of us moved. Then she smiled, the most horrible smile I've ever seen, and whispered, "He's still downstairs," before disappearing, not running, not walking, vanishing, like turning off a light. I screamed and ran from the room. Police arrived again. This time they searched more aggressively, including the basement. That's where they found it. A hidden room, behind an old storage wall. The space wasn't shown on any blueprint. Inside were old belongings, blankets, food containers, water bottles, and photographs. Hundreds of photographs. Every owner who had ever lived in the house, including me. The hidden room had clearly been occupied. Recently, Someone had been living beneath the house, watching, recording, following. Investigators eventually uncovered the truth. The elderly man who owned the house before me had a son, a severely disturbed son. Years earlier he disappeared. Nobody knew where he went. Police now believed he had secretly remained on the property, living inside hidden spaces, watching occupants, avoiding detection. For years, possibly decades, the evidence pointed directly toward him, but he was nowhere to be found, not in the hidden room, not on the property, gone. A month later I sold the house. I lost thousands. I didn't care. I moved 3 states away, started over, bought a small apartment, no basement, no attic, no hidden spaces. Life slowly returned to normal, until 6 months later. I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph, a recent photograph, taken through my apartment window. I was sleeping in bed. Written on the back were 6 words: "I finally found you again." To this day, police have never identified who sent it. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I still check every closet, every room, every shadow, because after what happened in that house, I'm no longer afraid of ghosts. I'm afraid of people. The voice on the baby monitor. The police found nobody inside my house. The problem was, while they were searching, someone whispered through my baby monitor, "They're looking in the wrong room." The voice wasn't mine. It wasn't my wife's, and it definitely wasn't my daughter's. Yet the words came through clearly. The officer standing next to me heard it too. He slowly looked at the monitor sitting on my kitchen counter. Then he looked back at me. Neither of us spoke, because we both knew something impossible had just happened, and what happened next would become the most terrifying night of my life. This happened in October of 2023. My wife Sarah and I had recently moved into a beautiful farmhouse in rural Ohio. The house was over 100 years old. Large wraparound porch, long gravel driveway, fields stretching for miles in every direction. It was exactly the kind of place we'd always dreamed about raising our daughter, Emma. At the time Emma was only 18 months old. Like most parents, our entire world revolved around her. Every room in the house had baby gates, cabinets had locks, sharp corners had cushions, and every night we relied on a baby monitor to keep an ear on her while she slept upstairs. At first everything was perfect. The house felt peaceful, quiet, safe, but after about 2 months strange things started happening. Small things, things easy to dismiss. We'd hear footsteps upstairs while Emma was asleep. Doors would occasionally be open when we were certain we had closed them. Sometimes we'd find toys moved into different rooms. Sarah blamed me. I blamed Sarah. Neither of us thought much of it, until the voices started. The first time happened around 1 a.m. I was downstairs watching television. Sarah had already gone to bed. Emma was asleep. The baby monitor sat beside me on the coffee table. Suddenly static crackled through the speaker. At first I assumed interference. Then I heard a voice. A man's voice. Soft, almost impossible to understand. I immediately muted the TV. The voice continued. It sounded like somebody whispering. I couldn't make out the words. After several seconds it stopped. I checked Emma's room immediately. Everything looked normal. She was asleep. Nobody was there. I told Sarah the next morning. She laughed. Probably another monitor nearby. That explanation made sense, at least at the time. Over the next week the whispers continued. Always late at night. Always through the monitor. The voice was always male, always distant. Sometimes it sounded like mumbling. Other times it sounded like somebody talking directly into the microphone. One night I finally understood a sentence. Clear as day. She's awake. I nearly dropped the monitor. I ran upstairs. Emma was standing in her crib, wide awake, staring toward the closet. Not crying, not moving, just staring. I asked what she was looking at. She slowly pointed toward the closet, then said something that still makes my skin crawl. The tall man. There was nobody in the closet, at least nobody visible. That night Sarah stopped laughing. For the first time she looked genuinely concerned. We checked every lock, every window, every room. Everything was secure, yet neither of us slept much after that. A few days later we installed cameras. One in Emma's room, one in the upstairs hallway, one covering the back entrance. The footage seemed normal, for a while. Then came October 17th, the date I'll never forget. At 2:13 a.m. my phone alerted me. Motion detected. Emma's room. I immediately opened the camera feed. My stomach dropped. Emma was standing inside her crib, looking toward the corner of the room, the corner near her closet. Nothing unusual. Then movement appeared. A shadow, human-shaped, standing perfectly still. The figure seemed impossibly tall. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. I stared in disbelief. The image glitched, and the figure disappeared. I woke Sarah immediately. We rushed upstairs. Emma was asleep again. The room was empty. No shadow, no intruder, nothing. But neither of us could explain the footage. The next evening things became worse. At dinner Emma casually mentioned her friend. Children have imaginary friends all the time. We weren't worried initially. Then she described him. He lives in the wall. Sarah and I exchanged a nervous glance. What does he look like? Emma shrugged. He's tall. That answer hit us like a truck, because neither of us had ever mentioned the tall figure from the footage. Not around her. Never. For the next several days Emma continued talking about him. The tall man. The wall man. Sometimes she'd wave toward empty corners. Sometimes she'd talk to somebody who wasn't there. One afternoon I heard her laughing alone in her room. When I checked, she was sitting on the floor, facing the closet, holding a toy teacup. She smiled. The tall man says hi. I nearly grabbed her and ran out of the house right then. Instead, we convinced ourselves she was imagining things. Kids do weird stuff. That's what everyone told us. Friends, family, even our pediatrician. And honestly, we wanted to believe them. Until Halloween night. Sarah was visiting her sister. Emma was asleep upstairs. I was home alone. Around midnight I heard something unusual through the monitor. Not whispering, not static. Footsteps. Slow footsteps. Walking across Emma's room. I checked the camera. My blood froze. A man stood beside her crib. Tall, thin, motionless. Watching her sleep. I immediately sprinted upstairs. I didn't even grab my phone. Didn't think. Didn't breathe. Just ran. When I burst into the room it was empty. Emma was asleep. Nobody was there. The camera feed still showed movement alerts, but there was nothing visible anymore. I called police immediately. 2 officers arrived within minutes. They searched everything. Every room. Every closet. The attic. The basement. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No evidence. Just like every horror movie where nobody believes the victim. Except this time something happened. Something none of us expected. While officers searched upstairs, the baby monitor crackled. Static filled the speaker. Then a voice emerged. A man's voice. Clearer than ever before. They're looking in the wrong room. The officer beside me froze. I froze. The monitor went silent. For several seconds neither of us moved. Then every officer in the house began searching again. More thoroughly. Much more thoroughly. That's when they discovered something. A section of wall in the basement sounded hollow. The house was over a century old, renovated countless times. Nobody had noticed before. Officers removed part of the paneling. Behind it was a narrow hidden corridor. My stomach dropped. The passage extended beneath the entire house. There were old electrical lines, storage areas, tiny crawl spaces, places nobody would ever think to check. The hidden corridor connected directly to the walls behind Emma's bedroom, and behind our bedroom, and behind the living room. Someone could move through much of the house unseen. The officers followed the passage deeper. Then they found evidence, recent evidence, water bottles, food wrappers, blankets, a battery-powered lantern. Somebody had been living there. Recently, very recently. One officer shouted for backup. Another called detectives. The realization hit me all at once. The voices, the footsteps, the shadow, the monitor, the toys moving. None of it was paranormal. Somebody had been inside the walls, watching us, listening, living there. I thought that was the worst part. I was wrong. Detectives found notebooks, dozens of them, filled with observations, notes, schedules, descriptions of our daily lives, descriptions of Emma, descriptions of Sarah, descriptions of me. One entry read, Emma likes the yellow teddy bear. Another, the father checks the monitor every night. Another, the little girl talks to me now. I felt physically sick. The police searched all night, but they never found the person responsible. He escaped. Somehow, the hidden corridor led toward an abandoned root cellar behind the property. From there he vanished, into the darkness. Gone. For weeks we stayed in hotels, then with relatives. The house sat empty while investigators searched every inch. Eventually they uncovered the truth, or at least part of it. Decades earlier the property belonged to a man who worked as a handyman. He performed countless renovations, including adding hidden maintenance spaces. Years later he disappeared without explanation. Nobody knew where he went. Police believed the person living inside our walls might have been related to him, possibly even his son. Nobody knows for certain. What they did know was horrifying. Evidence suggested the intruder had been entering homes for years, maybe decades, living secretly inside unused spaces, watching families, avoiding detection. 6 months later we sold the farmhouse, at a huge loss. I didn't care, neither did Sarah. No amount of money was worth staying there. We moved to a newer neighborhood, smaller house, closer neighbors, no crawl spaces, no hidden corridors, no old walls. For almost a year everything was normal. Then one evening a package arrived, no return address. Inside was a single photograph, Emma, playing in our new backyard. The picture had clearly been taken recently, very recently. My hand started shaking. On the back someone had written, "She still remembers me." We called police immediately. The case remains unsolved. No fingerprints, no DNA, no clues, nothing. Emma is older now. She barely remembers that house. At least that's what we thought. A few months ago I was putting her to bed. As I tucked her in, she looked toward her bedroom wall. Then she smiled, a small innocent smile, the kind only children can make. I asked what she was looking at. Her answer made my blood run cold. She said, "The tall man says you're still checking the walls." I didn't sleep that night. And honestly, I still check them, every single night. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't a ghost. It's discovering that someone has been living just a few inches away from you the entire time, watching, waiting, and learning everything about your life.